You're estimating a $10 trillion economy by 2033, and that's a very bullish estimate. There are aspects of the India story which are very promising. And yet, there have been things that happen in India that may frustrate you or make you tear your hair apart in terms of reforms that you'd like or things that you'd like to happen a certain way. Do you want to spend a moment on that? At this moment, what more would you like to see India do to be able to grow faster, to develop faster, and to be a bigger player in the international world trade order?
So, to grow faster, if you grow 8%, it's a bit hard. Of course, China at once grew at 10%. I think India can grow 8 to 10%. I think it's more on a question, how can that continue? How can you sustain that growth for the coming decade? And I think then you have to continue with reforms. Countries that stop reforming will also stop growing at that level. So every year there will need to be a new reform agenda. I think a prerequisite for the growth that we have seen is the digital connections and also the fact that you're able, and that will be a big surplus, because I'm worried that we can move into a decade of low growth if we don't get it right now. We're seeing that growth is seriously slowing in Europe. We see that growth is also slowing in China and even have some deflation. If we don't continue to trade with each other and have a win-win approach, I think we can have a repetition of the 70s. That was a lost decade when it came to growth, 10 years with low growth. But why am I partly bullish that we can avoid this? And that is related to the new technologies. I think not only AI, but also big data, the changes in biology, we see it also in the health area. I think those new technologies will increase the productivity. We will produce even higher up in the value chain. And I think that can potentially lead to the necessary growth stimulus in the global economy. Of course, some people are afraid, oh, we will lose our job because AI. But you know, since the Industrial Revolution, all new technologies kill some jobs, but they lead to new and more interesting jobs higher up in the value chain, and you can get more prosperous. This time, India is not losing out on a new industrial revolution. I think if India gets it right, you can even drive the fourth industrial revolution. You see manufacturing is coming into this country. You also see that it's not only the back office of the world anymore, it can even be the front office. But then the government has to not get complacent. It has to then continue with the reforms. You have to invest more in the infrastructure. You have to invest more also in education. You have to invest more in research and development. That's where the new tax base will, and the tax and revenues will have to be invested in what can increase your competitiveness. And the digital IDs and all this has led to increased revenues from taxes without increasing the tax levels. This is incredible, but no, invest in the future, not in the past.
You know, the World Economic Forum has been at the forefront of ideating and innovating on the fourth industrial revolution, and that's been one of your big ideas at Davos, which your founder, Klaus Schwab, is very personally passionate about. Do you want to share with this audience here how you see the fourth industrial revolution play itself out in the Indian context? Because India has missed out initially on account of British colonialism and later on account of the country not being equipped at that moment on some of the previous industrial revolutions. How do you see the fourth industrial revolution story play out from all the frameworks and parameters that you've drawn?
So first, let me come back to where we are today. Globally, there are 4 billion people that are not adequately digitally connected. India is not in that group anymore because you have 1.4 billion people that are digitally connected. You know, maybe not all 1.4 billion, but a lot of them. So there you have like a positive dividend. So this time, India has a good opportunity to benefit from this new revolution. As I mentioned, no, India has to be fast in implementing these new technologies. AI is changing the way you operate. If you can then choose to let AI take on some of the back office's role, or you can have it supporting you to be more effective, I would take it on and then be more effective, and then you can use the skills and the labor to other things that do pay more off. For those that are like, you know, it was for those that stick to the sailboats when there are other ships there, they lost. So it's really, really important now to bring it on. I think one of the challenges India has, though, is the skills gap. There needs to be a lot of upskilling, reskilling, and right skilling, because there are no more jobs in this area than there are skills. So that skills gap has to be closed, because you need to then have the right people to go into these jobs.
No, but do you see that as a threat for a country like India? It could be an opportunity if you're able to up your skill game. But the fact that the quality of the higher educational institutes that we have aren't necessarily producing en masse top-end computer engineers or scientists or AI programmers. Instead, you're producing a bunch of generalists, some of whom may be super specialists at the very cutting edge of what's happening in Silicon Valley, in the US and in India, but a lot of them, which means potentially, do you see, we've already seen from McKinsey and from several other top corporates, estimates of job losses running into the hundreds of millions.
So, as I said, in all industrial revolutions we have gone through, there has been jobs in the past that will be replaced by technology. Those that are slow in implementing and hugging the new technologies will not do so well. These countries will then have lower growth than those countries that embrace the new technologies, are first movers and fast movers, and they will then get more interesting jobs and they will do better. You know, it is not a priori given that if you do well today, that you're guaranteed to do well tomorrow. After the Second World War, Argentina was probably the second or third richest country in the world. It took 10 years, and they were a lower middle income country. Look at Kenya and South Korea. In 1960, they had the same GDP per capita. Today, South Korea has 30 times the GDP per capita than Kenya. So this also shows that India has huge opportunities if you continue the reforms, don't get complacent, invest the additional revenues now in upskilling, better education, research and development. When you can land this thing on the south pole of the moon, you can also get a much better primary education, secondary education, upgrade your universities, invest in all these areas. I think another thing, since you also, Rahul, asked about reforms, I think there is a bit of reforms potential still on the red tape in this country. You need to be world-leading in setting up businesses, getting away from unnecessary bureaucracy. Of course, you have to have rules and regulations, but it should not take a long time. If a young person has an idea, wants to commercialize it, set up this, it takes too long still to get these things done. And that, I think, will be a part of the next reforms that will come, and there has to be a reform agenda every year, and then I'm very bullish on